The pre-K 5 Eagle Academy pre-referendum committee to order. Today is Wednesday, October 8th, 2025, and it's 6 o'clock. May we have a roll call, please?
Randy Daigle.
Here.
Sheila Vaughn. Christine DeBoni.
Here.
Lauren Andrews.
Here.
Gina Sakala.
Here.
Bob Crisati.
Here.
Janet Cushman. John Day.
Here.
Kate Flanagan.
Here.
Steve Macchio. Jim Masuda.
Here.
Amanda Pickett.
Yep.
Charles
Here.
Riley. Jeff Russo.
Here.
Scott Ryder. Jacqueline Valley. And Tech Tom, we have Jeff. Dustin.
Yes.
Antonia.
Yes.
And Chris Lakely. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Did everybody get a chance to read the regular meeting minutes dated October 27th, 2025? And if so, are there any comments or corrections? August 27th, 2025. If not, can somebody make a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Show of hands, all in favor? Anybody against? Anybody abstain? Thank you, unanimous. Just let everybody know we're being recorded this evening, so I will be on my best behavior. We're gonna move right on to the presentation by the architect. They've been, well, you will see tonight. Tonight is a pretty important meeting. Some of the Board of Ed and council members are gonna be here. They said they're gonna be a little late, but I explained to them that this is an important meeting. We have some decisions to make this evening to determine the direction we're going. As you will see tonight, the extent and amount of work that Tecton's entire team has been doing. And I can't be any more happier with everything they're doing. So we'll pass it over to you, Franklin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Randy. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff Wazinski, principal at Tecton Architects.
Antonia Ciavarella, architectural designer at Tecton Architects.
Justin Hopkins, Senior Project Manager at Tecton.
Okay, I am going to screen share. So I think everybody, well, I guess nobody's watching remotely, but the recording should see the full screen now. Everybody should have a copy of the presentation in front of you for this evening. The agenda is fairly robust. Our last meeting together, full group, was late August 27th. We had a non-meeting meeting during, middle of September. So this is an important meeting to talk about all the updates, all the activities that we've basically been scheduling and participating in. We've pushed the refinement of the preferred options a bit further, and you'll see that this evening. And thank you. So the agenda for tonight, wanted to go over some of the meetings that we've had. We had 4 fairly significant and important meetings where the first one was a discussion about the pre-kindergarten or early childhood care, the whole program, how that relates to the district, what their current and future plans are, and some strategies to employ into the options. The second was an in-depth conversation about Eagle Academy, how the current operations work. We talked about the facilities, but we also talked about the future, what that future holds as far as the program, the build out. Really good follow-up information from that. We have some slides to go to over there in more detail. We had a focused discussion on specialized education as it relates to the elementary grade level, which also was very, very helpful. The takeaway got into a lot of the programmatic requirements as it relates to a 3 or 4 school scenario. So that helped provide a lot of clarity to us as far as the program and spatial requirements for that. And then we had a meeting to review, a higher level meeting to review some of the options with the superintendent and their staff, just to make sure that we're moving in the correct direction, refining, meeting the expectations. So 4 very good meetings since the last time. We'll go over the preferred options. There's a board in the middle part of the table, and we'll go through, the strategy will be, we'll go over the high level kind of framework for the options. And then I'd like to kind of show you on this plan, just physically, how phasing and logistics would work in some of those options. All of the plans, all of the sites are at the same scale. And what I think is helpful here is that you can put it in context, and it's a better relationship than rather looking at each of the slides, because they're at different scales. So that board's pretty important, and I'll explain it once we get to it. We'll summarize, if we remember, and we'll kind of summarize the discussion that we had relative to the benefits and challenges of the 3 and 4 school scenarios that this group had as we pinned up on the wall. We'll discuss the community engagement. We have some flyers. All the boards are up in the buildings. We have the handouts for the community conversation. That community conversation is October 22nd. So that's coming up quickly. And that's, I think, the first formal opportunity for the community to participate. And really what we want to do is just outline kind of the framework of the existing conditions, what we've explored so far as the options, and really more or less give them the background and the foundation of what we've been charged to do, and listen. Hopefully it'll be well attended. Hopefully they'll bring questions, and it's really a information collecting session. So we'll talk about that and all the activities related to that, and then the next steps, which there are some other follow-up meetings that we'll want to have, certainly, and as we move forward, it'll get more and more detailed. So this slide schedule you've seen before, so we're moving our way through the options development. We have a pretty good handle on the programming and needs assessment, which is kind of that second line down, if you will, the cyan color. So as Randy had mentioned, tonight's an important meeting. We want to really start honing in on where we want to head with these options. So a lot of material to review. Please mark on your calendar, we're going to have the demographer, MP Planning, Mike Zuba, is planning to come in on November 19th, and I'll confirm that again, but he'll be coming in, he'll be far enough along with their work to give us a better read on the enrollment projections, which obviously is a big part of what we're doing. So if you have questions, specific questions for that individual, please send them through Randy. We'll get them to him so he's prepared for that meeting, but that'll happen on November 19th. And then you'll see the community conversations down at the bottom, and then kind of the overall strategy moving into the fall, which is now starting to feel like fall, and then into winter. So this slide you've seen, but for those that are, I guess, attending for the first time from the public or from listening to the recording, this slide will be in every presentation. It sets up the framework and the basis for the options. It really is just the existing conditions, original construction, when they had renovations, when there's planned roof replacements, because that has an impact on overall reimbursement, the existing grade level configuration, the existing enrollment, and the size of the building in a gross square footage. It's a good kind of table to go back to when you start looking at the options. So I mentioned the design team activities, and Tony and I will kind of cover most of those. We've attended the ones that I just reviewed. And the summary of the pre-K discussion, again, well prepared, gave us a lot of information programmatically, so I feel like we have a good handle on what the programmatic needs are across the district for that pre-K to 5. But what's great about a dedicated pre-K, because we want to hear kind of all aspects. As you know, we're looking at, one of the options is just, keeping STO and developing a pre-K, and then what's great about a pre-K to 5 overall. So The culture was a big consideration. I heard a lot about that, and everything related to that. I'm not going to read every bullet point, but what resonated for me, and Antonio, please speak up, and others that were in those meetings, was the culture, the engagement, the family engagement that, quite honestly, it's about the people that run that program and the techniques that they employ. And we had a good conversation about, okay, how can that be preserved no matter what the option is? And that was a good opportunity to have that discussion. When we talk about what's great about the pre-K, there's the opportunity for lessening the transition. So educationally, we know the least amount of transitions, the better off the student is, because there's not kind of a step back every time there is a transition. So that is helpful. There's the mentor-mentee scenario that sets up well, and then the continuity of that education. They're getting to know that student basically for an extended period of time, which really will help them educationally, social, emotionally, all kinds of benefits there. So
That covers it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, good conversation.
Can I ask a clarifying
Yeah.
question on this one that I think is important that came up in our last meeting? Is that it's not just Stowe pre-K programming that's currently in Stowe and meeting space. There is town-wide programming, so thinking of ECDC, before and after school programming, and the multi-use of that space.
Yeah.
And whatever decision that we make also impacts town partners and town investment, and thinking of other strategies maybe we'll talk about through this discussion around like special legislation and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and you'll see further on deeper into the deck, slide deck. We've given a lot of thought, born out of these conversations, we've given a lot of thought to what happens with the buildings or sites that we may not want to use, depending on what option is selected. And I think we have some good information to really start thinking about. And one of those is Stowe, understanding how the building's being used, where the pain points are operationally for ECDC and the town-related functions. So I think we have a decent start to a resolution to some of those program challenges. So Eagle Academy, and again, I don't want to speak for those at the table, but another good conversation. Had a pretty good understanding, having Justin's completed, and I think we spoke to this at some previous meetings, similar related projects related to this kind of program. So we do understand that every program is a little different, but we understand some of the challenges and opportunities that exist within Eagle Academy. Ideally expanding to elementary grade levels and looking at it comprehensively or holistically is an important piece. So part of the conversation was, because they only have 4 classrooms right now, part of the conversation is how do we adequately and appropriately and responsibly plan for the future with this program, because as many of us know, it's an increasing need as the years go on, and so many communities are trying to get their arms around it. So I think we have, again, a good start to a program that offers a lot of future flexibility and for build out. But we did hear some of the concerns relative to no space for physical education, cafeteria, some of the things that you would otherwise see, experience, and feel in a school, they don't have there. So how can we replicate that? Because the whole idea is to really have them go into this program, but place them back into their home school. So any other thoughts on that one? We have the folks, any other high level?
No, I think you captured it.
Okay. So this slide you've seen before, but for those that are new or listening, we wanted to include kind of just the existing conditions related to that and where they're located for those that aren't aware of the program and where it's located, and some of the challenges that exist. We got into some pretty good detail relative to the program adjacencies and the sizes of the spaces that are needed, and all of that's been documented pretty clearly. in these slides, but also in our meeting notes as well. So we, again, just confirmation that we have good understanding of it.
Let me just,
Sure.
so when he's talking about making the sizes of the classrooms or whatever based on the programs, he's using the projected numbers, not the current. So all along, we're trying to get grasp of what the new enrollment will be in the next 2 to 5 years when these things actually get built. With all the development going on, it's really hard. So that's why these meetings with the consultants are going to be very important to kind of dial it right down. We don't want to build a building that's suitable for today. We want to build a building that's suitable for the future. So
That was gonna be my question. So we
Yeah.
can, for projecting space for 5 years from now, project special ed needs space. Can we not do the same for pre-K? And project enrollment for pre-K in the same type of way?
We have, yep.
we have every program has that, and you'll hear as we go on. I just wanted to do this first. When they're going to hit each program for each building, you will see. Thank you, sorry.
No, that's great. One other comment related to Eagle, which I think is an important piece when we start talking about the options. And again, I don't know if we have all the right answers tonight, but we have some recommendations. The location is an important piece. The current location, we went into it thinking that it's an ideal location because it's somewhat close to the high school. But we heard something different, which is when we heard it, it's logical that the better the separation, the better it is for the students and sometimes the family. So when we're thinking about where to place this program, we have to think about that because we went in thinking something completely different. It's better to kind of step away from the environment that you're having challenges with. So
To
again,
be fair, when we first opened, we
Yep.
thought that was better also.
Yeah.
And then we lived it for a little bit.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
saw that it's really not.
yeah, and there's some examples of incidents and things like that are just create operational challenges. But in general, I just wanted to say that because it was something different than what we thought going in.
I think that also is a little change in intent to design a program too. I think if it is truly a gradual release back to high school, it makes sense to be on campus or close. But if it's truly a therapeutic outplacement school that we're hosting in district, then there's a difference.
Yeah. So it was good to have that discussion. We then had a focused discussion on specialized education, and in particular for early elementary and intermediate elementary, we'll call it the pre-K to 2 scenario. And again, we went over both scenarios, a 3 and a 4 school, what would be needed in each school, the support spaces, and then some of the adjacency relationships as well. So this isn't necessarily going to show up tonight, but it's going to show up once we start developing the more detailed program for each building. Because what we want to do is make sure we size these buildings appropriately for all the capacity concerns, but also for these specialty programs, because that's a miss in all of your existing schools. And it's not a criticism of anybody, it's just when they were designed and built, we never had these kinds of programs. And we see that, in many, many different communities where they're challenged to use a lot of different spaces that were originally designed for storage or things like that for these specialized educational needs. So again, this is also relevant when it comes to reimbursement as well, because there is that legislative piece, that 15% increase specific to just the specialized education spaces. So we want to make sure we track those as we move through, because that's a cost impact or benefit from a reimbursement perspective. So I'm not going to go through the detail. I think, again, we were given all of this detail, which is fantastic. So it outlines a lot of the programmatic needs for each of the different scenarios for each of the schools. So good handle on where we're headed. We just summarized it here.
So just to touch upon and clarify a little bit. The 15% reimbursement for pre-K, that is not going to be a forever thing from the state. Right now, it's not required, but it will be if they were in the groundwork, and that's why they're giving us the incentive to start doing it. In another 2 to 3 years, it's going to be required, so therefore, there's going to be no incentive to do it because it's going to be required. So with that being said, that also plays into the role of how do we go for our grant to the state? Do we go in for all the school, all the construction for the next 8 years, and then we lock in that reimbursement rate? As long as they approve it, they can appropriate the funds, and when we do it, then the funds will be there. If we stagger and do 3 schools and 1 referendum, and then the next 3 schools, it's gonna be total different costs. 1, you're gonna have escalation. 2, you're not gonna have that 15% reimbursement for the pre-K. So even though it just doesn't sound like a big deal, it is a huge multi-million-dollar big deal. So we have to really think about how we package this to submit it to the state in order to apply for the grants. So just to touch upon, it's not going to be here forever.
Thank you. Yeah. Great. So again, just for your record, a lot of good information and detail here. Maybe not relevant for today's discussion specifically, but wanted you to know that we had it, we collected it, and the individuals involved were really well prepared. So options planning, just if you remember back in August, late August, we went through, and for the public's benefit as well that are listening in or will listen in at some point to catch up. We looked at all kinds of different options and basically had a good discussion around the benefits and challenges of each. I won't make you relive all of it, but what I want to do is just capture that we looked at a basic, we'll call it consolidate renew, option A, which was really just looking at the existing catchment areas and combining the schools. Then we looked at a 3-school scenario, which would be, I like the term optimize rather than consolidate because we really are optimizing. So a 3-school scenario, then we looked at a 4-school scenario, looked at the size, not only the student population, but the size of the building, what could fit, does it make sense to add, renovate buildings? But if we're gonna look at option B or C, doesn't make a lot of sense to try to use the existing buildings because the populations change, so the needs change a little bit. We can investigate that a little more, but it kind of proves out in the dollars with the reimbursement. So we just want to make sure we're careful, we communicate that to the community and they understand the reasons why. So B and C we looked at and all the alternatives within that. And then on the far right, just to make sure everybody's there's also the option of what if we do nothing and we just fix it as we go. So that's certainly an option. That the reimbursement modifications to that, you're going to have a lot more ineligibles. It's going to cost the community more in the long run, certainly, because you're going to have to pay for projects on a yearly basis if you decide to implement them on a yearly basis. And some of the projects you're not going to be able to do over a summer. So you're going to pay things like premium, staging, separation, general conditions to start and stop work. And then on top of that, it's the reimbursement that really hurts you there. So we'll provide more detail for that inevitable conversation with the community, but I just want to make sure that, we just didn't jump into, a final option. We did look at kind of a wide lens, look at it through a wide lens, and landed. In the conversation where we landed, we really started focusing in on the 3-school scenario, whether it be a pre-K to 5 scenario with 3 buildings or a 3-building scenario with K to 5. So I'll go to this slide here. just for those that individual. And again, I know this is repeat for some, so I'll try to move through it quickly. B is the three schools, so pre-K to 5, B1. B2 is basically pulling out the pre-K and having that as its own building and then having 3 K to 5s. B2 and C2 become much more costly because of you lose that 15% reimbursement on the pre-K. The 15% reimbursement on the pre-K, if you follow all of the regulations, is applied to the entire building. So that's another important piece to understand. So that's why B2 and C2 quickly came off the table, just because there's a pretty wild swing in the costs. So again, a lot of information on this slide. These are all your sticky notes.
Can I just, so
Yeah.
that we've already made a decision that we are not going to do a pre-K standalone K-5 model.
So where we landed at the last meeting was, and correct me if I'm wrong, is this slide. So we kind of ruled out A, we kind of ruled out the C2 and C3 and all the Ds. So we were focusing in on B1, B2, and C1.
Yep.
So that's where we left off back in August. And don't.
Sorry, what I just heard was like, we're not doing.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if that conversation was truly over, if we were still entertaining some conversation about it.
So go ahead.
I think the cost, the discussion about C2, the cost disparity, when you start tackling 4 elementary schools with standalone pre-K, it just became so significant. So
Right.
the study is still there for comparison for B2 in the 3 school model with the standalone pre-K.
Yeah, I assumed I had C2 taken off. I was just assuming that for tonight's conversation, B2 is still something we're talking
Yep.
about.
So yeah, if I
It's okay.
didn't describe that correctly. And you know, there's a lot of caveats on all of this. Like if we, through more conversations, find that, you know, a part of another option makes more sense because we learned something new, then that's fine too. You know, there is no, this is part of the process, to have these conversations, to talk about what's best overall for the community. So so I don't want, you know, nothing set in stone, but we, as a group, decided to kind of migrate to these 3.
Yeah, no, I had recalled those. I got my old school notes here.
All right, so we got that part anyway. So I put this slide in here because for whatever reason, the state updated the reimbursement rates in August. And the main takeaway from this slide is the 2 circles. The reimbursement rate for renovate as new is 70%, and the reimbursement rate for new construction is 68.33. The reason why I bring it up is because for as long as I've been doing it, there's always been a 10% delta between renovate as new was a higher percentage and new construction was always 10% less. This is just as of August, and I don't have an inside track or anything, but so a lot of communities, that reimbursement rate got quite, I mean, they're nearly identical. So the whole conversation around trying to prove that a new construction is just as cost effective as renovate as new, it's still important, but it's kind of less important down to, you know, whatever that is, 1.7%.
Now, also, the reimbursement rate, 70% or 68.3, and ladies in the back can verify this, and council members, that is very high. I deal with a lot of communities, and some of them are like 12%. I was at a meeting several weeks ago when I was talking to somebody, and it was probably, I think they were probably like 20 to 30 minutes from us. I forget what town exactly it was. And I told him we're like at 68 to 70%, and he's like, "You're so full of crap. There's no way, wait." I said, "What are you at?" He says, "We're at 24%. And he said, "They've never been higher than that." And I'm like, "Well, you gotta get your shit together, I guess." But kudos for everybody that has influence on this, because this is extremely, extremely high. And like they're saying, there used to be a delta between renovated new and new construction, and that was kind of the final decision that made which direction we're going. I've never had this luxury, nor it sounds like them, to do whatever, whichever direction we feel is best. Because the dollar amounts are pretty much the same, so this is huge.
Now, that's higher than the 2025 rates, right? We initially saw
Slightly higher, yeah.
slightly higher.
Yeah.
What were the 2025 rates we initially saw?
I'll,
But these are definitely, these are definitely higher.
I think we got
Justin will-
it now.
it's like a percent.
But I guess my question is like,
Yeah.
for how long do we lock into these rates? I mean,
Well, we
Well,
do
it depends
all
on
together.
the way we
So
block
then when if the referendum passes, then we apply to the Secretary of State, that's when the rates get locked.
so as soon as the paperwork's in, referendum passes, paperwork's in, and then we lock in.
Then it's
Even
locked.
if we build 2 years later.
Exactly, that's what I was saying earlier about packaging this. We gotta package this so everything is, we reap the deductions and the reimbursements now. The money will be appropriated, but it won't be allocated until 3 to 5 years when we do it, but everything will be locked in. That's what I mentioned earlier, that we, all about packaging this thing to the community.
So in August, we had one that said renovated is new at 68.57% and new construction at 58.57.
So that's it's a really big.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Not including the 15%.
Looks like we're hitting the timing rate.
We're very fortunate, yes.
Can I clarify the last number 7 here about the 15% I get for special ed program and 15%, we're calling it early childhood care. Does that cover ECDC, the birth certificate?
Like infants, yeah, infants, toddlers.
There's a paragraph that this is all tied to that I've seen, which I've shared in previous presentations, and that's basically the description that we have to go off of. I think once we fold in some of the town-related programs, that has to be a conversation, and I may lean on, some of the representatives to get that meeting with the state to have a more detailed conversation about it. But what we're basing all of that off of is that one paragraph that was passed last year in the spring session.
This is what I am just thinking out loud, getting into our discussion that we're about to have, and my affinity for a pre-K space.
Yeah.
I think we could build pre-K in our K-5 with like our specialized integrated program, which we've been starting to do, and get the 15% reimbursement and renovate a brand new early childhood hub with ECDC and Head Start. Head Start's gonna be the hard one that we heard,
Right.
just split up between schools.
Right.
And get a dedicated new building of a pre-K space to put in the remaining pre-K programming and town partnership programming
Yeah.
with that 15% as well. So you get it on all the buildings.
Yeah, my only hesitation to a definitive response is, this is for public school construction grants. When the town functions come, into play, that's a question. I don't want to guide you
That
in any
makes sense.
correct direction.
Would we have to go, for special legislation for that?
I have not been involved in town-funded related programs that go through a school construction grant reimbursement. We've been involved in some projects with City of Hartford where they had a public library that they got some related reduced reimbursement rate for building those community libraries, community health centers, things like that. I just haven't been involved in one where it's that. So
There's not too many
Yeah.
in the state of Connecticut, I don't believe.
This is
that
a
ha-
learning
It's a very, we have like
Yeah.
a very special
Yeah.
program.
My other wonder is I am under the impression that the state is going to be building out this preschool endowment through public schools, opening more school readiness spots. And that is going to be the phasing in plan, so having space for them. And the dollars will be coming through education.
Sure.
And so my guess is when we think about that paragraph that we're trying to interpret on how, like what constitute as early childhood.
Yeah.
My guess is that's going to be loosely defined because the reality is they need town to start building space for our preschoolers to start that endowment program actually happening.
Yeah,
Um,
the project we're doing in Cheshire is the first known one because they went for retroactive 15% for the early childhood.
Yeah.
We can dig in a little deeper just to, I know it's all through the schools there, but we could dig in a little deeper to see.
Yeah, I just think that we all agree on how do we maximize the dollars. Like, I think we all are in agreement on that.
Yeah.
But I also think about the programming and when you talked about projecting enrollment,
Mhm.
thinking about the phasing of that plan, getting additional school readiness seats, where do those seats go? Will they go in schools or is it easy to put them in one location? Kind of
Right.
those things.
That's all part of it.
Yeah,
So, so all of the numbers as we move into the options discussion, just a reminder, all of the numbers, all the enrollment numbers, the student projections, for the time being, I used basically the 10% increase to the current population until we get the numbers from MP planning, the demographer.
Jeff, if I could just close
Yeah.
the loop on the delta between FY '25 and FY '26. The renovate is new percentage or general construction percentage went down 1.79% for Enfield to 70%. And the new construction went up 6.5% to the 68.33. So a little bit coming down and the renovate is new and substantially increasing for the new construction.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Okay, so this is where we're gonna, unfortunately for the folks that are listening on the recording, but this is where we're gonna go back and forth between what I show on the screen and what's on the table here. This map is basically showing your attendance zones, your elementary school attendance zones. The red, Bernard and Crandall, yellow is Enfield Street and Parkman, and the green in the middle is Memorial and Whitney. The map with the dots in the gray background indicates where the kind of the density is of where the students are coming from. So if the darker and the more dots, that's where more students are coming from. So whatever option we do, and I realize in the past, the attendance zones were modified to more or less comply with state regulation as far as diversity. So that will be explored as we move through with the demographer. But just generally, if you take a step back and kind of squint, you can, and then you overlay and start thinking about where some of the housing projects are going to be that are already starting to move their way through the planning process. They're more north than they are south. So just, it's something to consider when we're looking at the options and what the capacities are for the site, that kind of stuff. So I thought this was helpful to kind of analyze because it informed us as we were trying to prep the options.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, and then that's just existing enrollment. So they're working on the future. So a lot on this slide, but let me start from the right-hand side of this slide. So this is the 3-school scenario. The first 2 builds are shown in the yellow. And this is just one way to sequence it. This isn't the only way. So it's just to start to get you thinking. So we could build a new building of 110,000 gross square feet behind the side of Crandall on that site for pre-K to 5 for somewhere between 785 to 825 students. That cost, and again, there's a lot of data behind it, but I rolled it into a simple number. The total project cost, everything needed to do the work is for that size building is about 120 million. CTE means cost to Enfield. You take out all the reimbursement, all that kind of stuff, it's 21 million. So you can kind of see that from a selfish perspective, from a CTE, from cost to Enfield, to move a needle on a project, it's gonna be like 10 to 12 million to move it one for Enfield. So just keep that in mind as well. And that somewhat plays into the discussion relative to should we fix what we have versus not, right? Just what value that is. And I'm not suggesting that one is better than the other, but so we're going to build a new building on Crandall. We're going to build a new building on Stowe. That we can do those first. And the timeline down on the bottom right-hand side, the green bar is the design time. The white bar is the construction time. So as I mentioned, or as we mentioned before, every project's probably going to take you about 4 to 5 years to complete. If you're going to do a phased occupied renovation, add another year or two to it. So what we're trying to look at in sequence here is you're not going to get a shovel in the ground. If you submit a grant application this June, you're not going to get a shovel in the ground until about 2028. You won't be cutting the ribbon on that building, whatever site it's in or where it's located. You're not going to be sending students through that door until basically fall of 2030. So it puts things in perspective where, there's going to be a lot of cost questions and things like that. And are we pushing this? And there's 5 years there. So the idea is that you would build one on the north side, one on the south side of your community first. And then what you could do is you can move the students that would be in those catchment areas into those two new buildings in 1 and 2. And then in theory, if you wanted to look at Hazard Memorial for the third site, which we thought was a central region to Enfield, though the students that are in there now could move to Barnard because it would be empty, right? So we would tear it down, we would move them in, right? So let me just make sure.
That becomes their swing space.
Let me make sure you get all this. Right. So you build a new building on Crandall, you build a new building on Stowe. Once those are done.
While people are in the other buildings.
Correct.
They're occupied. We're building in the back.
Right. So
Yeah, there's a map of
this is where this starts to become, so let me take Crandall, for example. So I think
If
we
you want
had
to gather around, you can,
one,
you
we
can
had
understand.
120 or so thousand, no, 100, what does it say? 110. So this is a 115,000 square foot building. All these buildings are 2-story. These for now, and this is just, this is a project that we've done in the past, right? So we know it works. This is a 2-story building. We wouldn't recommend going any higher. All of the buildings that are on these maps are 1-story buildings. So what you could do is you could easily come in, create a temporary construction entrance here. We'd have to talk to the neighbors and make it nice, but you put it here, you could put a fence up, you could build this building. This building could be in operation. When you're done, 1.5 years into it, the spring before the fall that this opens, you'd remove this, or as soon as you could start removing that, you could build your parking. A building of this size is probably going to want around 150 spaces. This is 120. This is 40. So it's in that range. So you could build the building for 1.5 years or so. Come when the students are out, tear down the building, prep the parking. And for my field folks, I put the 9v9 here. So we have. So what you can see, and what I'm trying to do with this exercise is show you the scale and density of each of these sites and what's possible. There's a lot of caveats here, wetlands, grading, approvals, all that kind of stuff. But so you can see that a building of this nature, it is possible for you to build a building in the back, keep the building operational, put parking kind of in the middle, fields afterwards, have your separation of bus and parent drop off, all that kind of stuff. And what's nice about, and we flipped we've done this quite often, and I'm sure Chris has as well. You land with, think about it from a community use perspective. Most of the community use is in the front. So off hours, you have parking in the middle for fields, parking in the middle for community use, which is up front. And then from a school operation perspective, you have great visibility for the admin and then you have a lot of queue getting deeper into, so from a bus, parent drop off, all that kind of, you're pulling
Everything off the main road.
Off the main
Like JFK, half the buses stay on JFK for 15, 20 minutes till it's their turn.
Do we have fields across the parking lot and other designs that you've done? Part of me is just like thinking that doesn't seem like a great design to have fields across the parking
Sure.
lot from a school, but
Sure.
if those are where's playground?
So there would be, I was showing fields from a community use perspective. There would be age appropriate, play areas surrounding all the perimeter buildings. So the students wouldn't be, I shouldn't say, not always, like a field day, there would be a pedestrian way to
Yeah.
get out there, but your main play areas and outdoor education spaces would be
Thank you.
adjacent.
And again, you gotta keep an open mind. This is not the exact layout. This is saying we can build a building,
Correct.
use that as swing space, then knock this down. The design is not gonna be exactly, the park is not gonna be exact. This is just in saying it can happen on this site.
These are testaments. to
So
Don't
is
worry
this-
about the placement of stuff.
Is this for a
Yeah.
specific site, like is this for a specific for like Eli Whitney or?
So what we're talking about, I know you folks just came in. We're reviewing the 3-school scenario, which are bigger buildings, 785 to 825 students, 115 gross square foot or 110,000. We're talking about building 2 new first, one on the north side, one on the south side of your town. Then we could move the students from Crandall and Barnard into that building. And then go to Hazard Memorial, if you want, if this was the site that makes the most sense. This is empty now. I can go in and build a new building
Because the kids are there.
because the kids are now moving in. The kids that are, the students that were in Crandall and Barnard are now in this building.
Right.
The students that are in this building could go to this building so that there's literally no disruption other than just more travel. And then the contract, then we can come in, we can put the building
Wherever.
anywhere we want. To be quite honest, when you start looking at the 3-school scenario, a building of that size is pushing, that's a lot of building for a small site.
Right.
You mean just for Hazardville or for?
Hazardville's is the tightest.
Yep.
The other one where we've seen some challenges is, well, Eagles has a challenge topographically, and traffic-wise, we had a lot of conversations related to that since our last meeting with the district. So this has its own challenges from a grading perspective. This one's from a capacity and Eli Whitney would have been fantastic if the library, basically Eli Whitney is from the drive over. So it really
That's small.
makes it difficult to look at it. Whereas the original property was the entire parcel. You could have very easily done what we're talking about here, there. But I mean, that's reality. The library's there. So,
That's not gonna work.
so we talked about building one on this site. You could do the same or a similar type of building at this size. This one's probably better on this site. But these aren't there anymore. And then you can, so Stowe has some property, has pretty good connections. So if you wanted to have a 3-school scenario, you know, we would try to use the sites that have the largest capacity. The reason why we first look at this kind of scenario is because the reimbursement covers everything. It covers the remediation, the removal, all the new construction, all the fields, so you're not, we did look at the properties that you gave us. If you go to a greenfield site, which is perfectly fine, they're gonna pay for what's on that greenfield site. They're not gonna say, all right, we'll go give you another 15 million to tear down the site and do fields here. That's part of the reason why we're trying to use the sites, the school sites where we
Also,
can.
we don't want another vacant building.
So the community will appreciate reuse of space, I think is,
That's what I keep hearing from the.
as long as we can
They don't want
demonstrate
any more empty buildings.
the
No, they're
lack
like, why do
of
we need any more?
interruption for
Yeah.
student learning
Yeah.
and safety. I think those will be the biggest things parents concerned about. I will just say Jacqueline's in the room now, so I think a wonder of mine is this option. I guess we'll see it in others, that if we
Right,
have other spaces, never mind, I'm gonna wait for
Yeah,
future
let 'em
demonstrations.
continue.
So the three school, obviously, bigger schools, we chose the three sites that you see up there, Stowe, Crandall, and Memorial. Could we do, Parkman possibly? We have a lot of different, they're neighborhood elementary schools, so we're up against a challenge of trying to communicate this. I'm not convinced that there's like ideal sites for three schools, because the three schools are 30, 40,000 square foot bigger. So they present some challenges. It's possible, if that's really the desire, we can really dig deeper and give you some, refined plans, but it's very tight.
But you're basically saying 4 schools are gonna fit better in these spots,
I-
because they're smaller.
I-
Right?
There's definitely more room to, yes.
Perfect.
I'm just being quite honest with you that you're really pushing the maximum capacity at these sites with buildings of that size. The other challenge, if you look back up on the screen, is we then end up, we first thought we were gonna, so what happens with the rest of the buildings? We could, in this scenario, we could repurpose Whitney for some of the central office and other programs that we heard are in need. We could look at Parkman as ECDC, but then you're starting to move programs that already are in places. It doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to me, so I don't know if we want to spend a lot of time on it, but we're trying to, with any of the options, we're trying to give you options to make sure that we're not just leaving buildings for.
I would just like to add, the ECDC is something we should consider
Mhm.
because they are very limited to space.
Yeah.
And so that's something that could grow on the town side.
And it's going to grow with the preschool endowment and school readiness
Yeah,
dollars
so
coming.
that would be
It's
a
coming.
good thing for the town.
All right.
I just, from what I understand,
Let them continue, because next one.
no, I was just gonna say, from what I understand, the superintendent, like the
We
4 school
encompass
model.
4 schools.
Yeah, so I'll move into that one because there's some more, thank you. So we looked at alternative sites for the 3 school to, show you that different programs can move. If you keep going, we go to the 4 school. Is this the one, the preferred?
The next one.
Next one. Okay, so if you can match in your handout this slide, so it says, it's the C1 4-school scenario with alternative site locations. This is, we feel, because as we've been moving through this process, we've had many different meetings. We feel this one starts to get all of the components together in a plan that may make the most sense. We could apply this strategy to the other options if you think other options are better, but let me start here. So first, 3 buildings, rebuild Hazardville Memorial on its site as it's occupied. It's a 85,000 square foot building, so it's 40,000 square foot.
So they would be doing it like behind,
Yeah,
So Jeff, can you just touch
like
on
where
that?
the soccer fields are now, I assume. Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
yes, go ahead, sorry.
No, can you just touch on that, because you kind of went there, but to put it in perspective, those 3 buildings, the biggest building right now is Crandall at 76,000 square feet. in the 3 building scenario, the new buildings are 40% bigger than that building, all 3 of them.
Footprint or?
Not footprint, because they're still 2 stories, but just in general, to fit that student population in only 3 buildings, you're now at 110,000 square feet, where right now your biggest building is 76,000 as it is currently. So going from those other buildings that are only in the 50s, that's 3 times as big now, right? I mean, give or take, but
Right.
in terms of parents, it's gonna feel gigantic compared to this now where he's going, which is normalized a little bit.
We're seeing a lot more of this scale building. We've just completed Madison, Norwalk, Cheshire's being built to a similar, like in that 85 to 90,000 square foot 2-story building. We're seeing a lot of that size, similar age range to pre-K to 5. So this option allows, think back to the existing conditions. Hazardville, we tried to pick the ones that are have the most need. Hazard Memorial, I think, is a clear winner. Crandall, close second. Parkman, well maintained, but the first 3 that we're showing here are a balance of the condition that they're in, the geographic location that exists today, which we can't do much about, and how can we phase all of this in a logical sequence. So we think you can build 1, 2, and 3 while all of those schools are in operation, because they're smaller buildings, and we have a couple slides, but I just put a building about 86,000 on this site, 2-story building. The benefit of Hazardville Memorial, that if you don't know, this is town owned and this is town owned. So things like staging, parking, where do I put materials? There's some options to like actually build this thing where you're not really impacting the site. So that was kind of interesting. So you build Hazardville, Crandall, Parkman, then same kind of scenario. You'd build, if you wanted to, you could build all of them at the same time. And then you'd build Barnard, and then look at Eagle at Whitney. So this plan here has a strategy for basically every site. And I think it addresses I felt like you maybe looked at this and tried to set me up with a question.
I didn't though. I've been thinking a lot about this.
But, so Eagle at Whitney, and we have a plan to show you on the build out that we learned for the program. Stowe could stay ECDC and expand, which we can show you, because right now
whole building.
they're setting up and taking down in the gym 4 classrooms, like almost every.
Yeah, wild.
It's packed.
Enfield,
Play lab.
yeah,
So it's
play lab.
Yeah.
6 classes right away that can go back.
Yeah.
And then Enfield Street,
Discussion, it might be helpful to be in the hall. I need to listen to him.
Enfield Street, we would repurpose. We have a plan to show you there. And then we could take ETLA and put it in the existing Eagle. So when you look at all of this, it kind of answers, well, what happens to this building or this property? The one thing I didn't do, I'm recognizing, is we should flush out what in general happens to Alcorn.
So the social services is still functioning out there. What a great location for social services. Right? There's a lot of people who walk up to the building daily. So, I mean, they could remain there, and they have space constraints, just like Board of Ed has space constraints. And also, if some of the park is a recreation, they were separated out years ago. Potential option to bring some of the parks and recreation office spaces back over to Alcorn as well.
So, so a lot of discussion still needs to be had as to, and Randy alluded to this, schedule. When do we do this? When do we file? when do we build? Again, there's a lot of info on here, but if you look at the bottom, that's really going to indicate for all the financial people in the room, your cash flow. So the green is designed, typically you don't bond until you hit the white. So in reality, if you're stepping on the gas and still submitting grant applications this year, you're not going to see a real ask until like 2028. So just, obviously there's a lot of variables there, but so if you could stagger them, I think it makes sense to stagger them.
How many years before we started actually?
To be quite honest, from just the volume of work too, in the community.
You mean stagger what?
So I'm staggering 5 of the projects, 3 first, 2 after.
You don't mean staggering the referendum, do you just mean staggering the work, or do you mean staggering the referendum?
That's a discussion that we need to have. I think there's a benefit, there's a risk and a benefit. The benefit of applying for the grants all at once is you can apply for a grant and get it. You don't have to do the project if something else happens. But you're never going to get that rate back.
Right.
So there's a little bit of conversation relative to that versus do you do a 2-step process? Because with the grant, reminder, you really you have to have the funding in place. So there's,
Because of others.
not in place, but allocated. You need the referendum. So if you go after all 5, you need to explain to the community why, or do you stagger it in 2 and take the risk that 15% goes away? So that's a conversation.
We have one shot.
So I just wanted to make sure that, so any questions on this slide? Because all the okay, so all the costs are there. In general, that should tell you everything you want to know about.
I guess the one thing to think about in this option, and I know we talked about it, but in community conversations and for us to think about is that's redistricting because it's for schools.
Yep.
And I will just say we'll have to be very careful with messaging on like timeline because school number 4 gets the shortest end of the stick and nobody wants to be school number 4.
Yeah, I understand your concerns. One comment I would say in response to that is just keep in mind that each of these would be a separate grant application. So it's not, so if somebody's concerned that, oh, you're going to spend all the money on the first 3 and I'm not, 4 and 5 are going to, that's not the way it works. Like each one of those is going to have its own.
I think just waiting, like the timeline.
Understood.
But I get it. We got to do something. I'm just saying for us to be aware of messaging and
I
conversation.
think with the volume of projects that are proposed for the North Zone, we're going to be forced to redistrict anyway. We have a couple options with some natural breaks in town to kind of strategically redistrict around projects, but also maybe increase our efficiency of busing by choosing the appropriate options.
Makes sense.
So just as a caveat to this room, but also the people that are listening, the number of students, the size of the building, and the costs are all going to change. They could go up, they could go down. The reason why is because we're going to refine the number of students with the final enrollment projections. That directly relates to the size of the building. And then if we change the sequence of one of these projects, so right now I have escalation for 4 and 5 all the way out into like that 2030 range. If you flip them, it's going to change. So it's a living document. Generally speaking, it has all of the numbers in there. But they're gonna, if somebody runs with this and asks why did it change from 57 to 58 or 69 to 62, it's because the number of students, the size of the building, if we pushed it out and schedule-wise, it's all connected. They're all analyzed and treated and costed the same way on a consistent basis. So I just so you know that.
One thing to keep in mind too, regarding the funding, we're not paying, whatever it ends up being, 77 million, we're not paying 77 million.
Right.
We're paying a small percentage of each of these So it'll be 10 years before we start even paying on some of these things because of the way it works is the town sells their bonds, their certs and all that, but $77 million is not, we're not looking for a check from taxpayers tomorrow. It's gonna be a gradual, and then by the time all of them are in, it's not 77 millions anymore because it's already been paying down. So that's something we just have to educate the public when we do our
And
speaking.
how long the bonds are.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
If it's
So,
a 30-year, 20-year.
you know, we have a 30-year bonds on somebody, so it's like, it's not coming out tomorrow or the next 10 years, so.
And the next step of this will be to plug this in with the finance department.
Yeah.
And see how this all, right, see how this all lays out with the current debt service in town, because there's naturally, right, there's things that are gonna drop off that are gonna be paid for.
Yeah.
And then we'll see how this, you know, you'll know, and then you'll be able to educate everybody and say, to Randy's point, it's maybe there, you know, there isn't an impact until year 6 or year 7, right, of this overall plan, and it, you know, just, we just need to talk to John.
Yeah, we'll know what our ceiling is.
Okay, so the next series of slides just provide a little more detail as to how things could be implemented. And again, these are very high level, call them test fits concepts. This is under the four school scenario, Hazard Memorial, rebuilding it. So the left side of this diagram is basically the existing condition. That yellow outline could be the footprint. Obviously, change it to maybe L shape or something, but you physically separate the two sites. You could use the adjacent townhome property for all the things that I said for construction logistics. On the right side, it's just showing what could be. You know, it could be 2 fields. You could have complete separation of parent and bus drop off, obviously an important piece, and you have all the green space around the building, as somebody asked, as the discussion that we had earlier about play space immediately adjacent to the building. Sorry. And then I just threw this slide in because I think there's some baseball or softball. So I didn't want to give
Do you have
soccer.
any additional packets of this?
What happened? There was 2 fields.
Yeah, I didn't want to give soccer.
Yeah, but now we can have a baseball and a soccer
Oh,
field. We'll
okay.
share, Jeff, we'll share.
Both could be turf, right?
Yeah, lights, dugouts, everything,
Dugouts.
whatever you need.
So just give.
70% reimbursement, so.
Right. So that gives you an indication as to kind of what we were looking at on the table here. So for folks that are listening or watching, it's kind of the activities that we're moving these buildings around real time on the table. Same kind of concept with Crandall. I didn't fill out all the diagrams, but again, this diagram that's on the screen is basically what was on the table. One thing as we move forward, will show and indicate more clearly is what's, you can't really tell, but I'll make sure it's clear, is a lot of our buildings will show, you'll have a classroom wing. We're going to show future expansion so that there's already space allocated, the site works, the infrastructure's there. If and when buildings need to be modified. So what we don't want to do is, we want to future-proof the building and the site, and so that's a strategy that will show and articulate a little bit better in these floor plans, but it is there, it's just not as clear as it could be.
One of the things too, Gina was talking about, or mentioned to me, was we're gonna build a relationship and a rapport with the neighbors. We're not gonna just build a property and say, you know, it's a school, we're gonna do what we want with it. So we're gonna build a relationship with the neighbors because it's gonna be, they're gonna hear it. So we're gonna have some kind of establishment. We've done it in all the schools that we've done. We've had neighbors come in, even when we were building the high school, we had the Head Start, had construction hats. This is a community thing. This is not being jammed down anybody's throat or any neighborhood. As you all know, we're really concerned on districting and having buildings placed best location to accommodate everybody. It would be a hell of a lot easier and cheaper if we just knocked down 65 acres and built up 2 schools and fields and say, screw you, but that's not what the intent is. So just, so you know, if there's any concerns regarding the site and neighbors, they will be, developed.
So the next series of slides talk about how some of the existing buildings could be adaptively reused for the programs that we know have needs.
Now, quick question, this is not included in, but this would have to come from the town money.
So what I haven't included are costs to renovate portions of these buildings yet.
Okay.
I will show you the areas of the building that could get reimbursement from the state. So as we move into, so this is the existing plan, just so you know how Enfield Street is used. And then this site plan is the proposed adaptive reuse. And there's a collection of programs that we think make sense, and thank you to John and the rest of the staff that have helped guide some of the conversations. Obviously, there's many more conversations ahead of us, but Enfield, and yes, we're gonna bump down into Mitchell Drive a little bit.
Hello, neighbor.
Yeah.
I see your $80,000.
We're gonna add the pool to the program.
That's one tree now.
So, central office, so Enfield Public Schools Central Office could be located in the green. I'm just gonna go clockwise. Enfield Adult Education, Buzz Robotics, which is the high school program, and John can help clarify.
So it's not the JFK one?
JFK has first Lego and first Tech Challenge that they run at that level. And then the high school is first Robotics, which is Buzz.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes, thank you. Yellow is alternative education, and then the purple is the gym, and I labeled it for now, or we labeled it now as auxiliary gym, but we've heard challenges related to practice, wrestling, things like that. So having that as a community and school-oriented function would be helpful, yes.
This also makes sense. I feel like the town just put an RFP up for Fermi, so the majority of the programs that are moving into here are coming from that building that we're hoping to, I guess, repurpose or sell or something.
Right.
So I think that makes sense. And gives proximity to the high school for some of these programs that might be actually a nice thing. So I think that's just also for our town council folks to think about the impact on Fermi programming and space, and regardless of what you do with that RFP, needing space for these things.
Yeah, and when you zoom in a little bit further, just into the floor plan, what's actually quite nice about this building is the way that it's set up now. The entry sequence, you know, if you think of this more like a multi-tenanted building, let's say, instead of a school, each of these colors being its own tenant, they can kind of operate independently, and at the same time share some of the, you know, the utility infrastructure.
Can I ask you to, because I love this idea about how you're moving adult ed and Buzz Robotics over, but one of the things that keeps being overlooked is at the annex is the Enfield High Wrestling Room.
That's addressed in the next slide.
And the next slide, okay,
Right.
thank you.
Yep.
Because that one keeps getting overlooked, but we forget that that's there and was donated by a private donor, so.
Yes, so that provides more color as to why it's the restaurant. I didn't hear the full background.
Thank you,
So yes, it's labeled top right of this slide. Yep.
that's awesome.
So underneath each of the labels, just so you have an indication, is the gross square footage. So we haven't gotten into any detail related to the programming, but that's gross square footage. So we think it works.
This slide that depicts each of these, like the CR, time CR and all
Oh,
that.
yeah.
So I just want you guys to look at,
This one?
yeah, that's the one. So they live, right now, I think we have 4 or 5 kind CR rooms. As you can see, these are being designed for the future. We got like 14, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So when you see that slide and you said education or gym or whatever, it wasn't just a ballpark. They really dialed down to the program requirements and future potential. So I just want everybody to understand that, you know, they didn't just circle this wing and say, all right, let's allocate it this. They all went through every school, which you'll see, and allocated classrooms for specific usage. So,
When we look at the proposed reuse of Enfield Street School, I know you haven't done the cost analysis yet for redesigning that, but I'm not, my hope would be that alt ed, Enfield adult ed, there is some type of reimbursement for central office space, that a lot of this would be considered educational space, so that might be somewhat helpful, but who knows, I have no idea how we.
So central office is 50% of your base reimbursement, so whatever the numbers were, half that. Historically, they're less intensive renovations, so they're meaning likely less cost per square foot because it's a less intensive use. I think you probably would get some reimbursement for alternative ed. I'm not quite sure about some of the others. We would have to look a little deeper on that. Adult ed, I don't think there's reimbursement for that. I think you'd get it definitely get it for central office at 50%. Alternative ed, you have to build a story around the auxiliary gym and buzz robotics, but we can take a swing at it, I guess.
Can I just say one thing, and I'm sure central office is tight on space and figuring things out, but very similar to the struggles that we have with Eagle Academy on the same campus as the high school. Alternative ed, I could foresee that also being a challenge.
I think we're okay with the location though. I think there could be some issues with separation, but even Alcorn or other sites, you know what I mean?
And I think Alcorn would be fine. It's just more the visibility factor. So I just put it out there to kind of just, again, having lived it for many years at this point, when sometimes the cons outweigh the pros. So I just put it out there as something to consider. I know initially it was talked about using our old building for alternative ed, and I know there was a lot of concerns on both sides. So obviously you're a little bit further up the hill. But it's just the visibility piece.
Again, I would say I think that's a good conversation for district to think about what is our alternative ed programming and how are we designing it and supporting it. Because I can see that concern, but I also think there's programming opportunities.
That's a good point. We'll have a conversation relative to that.
Right.
Yep. Okay, so that's Enfield Street. We're gonna move into Stowe. So this is just the existing site plan. You've seen this before. This is the current use plan. So the, what color is that? Purple, cyan, magenta. With the halo around it is the town use. So that's the ECDC current plan. So this plan, which is all the green, shows the possible areas where they could expand should the school functions come out, more or less. So I'll start with the fact that the gymnasium could be returned to an actual gymnasium.
Instead of the random.
Right. So the play lab, which was the original cafeteria, could be returned to use. Around the front of the building, you could have some expansion for infant and toddler if they so desire. I think that was.
Yes.
I think that was a comment.
They have 8 infants, so that was it. Getting into that was ridiculously hard.
You could look at, just from a logical perspective, putting support offices out front at the entry area just for visibility control, but also there are going to be some more support offices needed, admin space. Starting on the top left of the plan, again, more support offices. We just put them there because there's admin offices back on that side of the building anyway, because if you remember, there's parking on that side. So that's another entry point for the building. And then in the middle portion, there's 4 basic classroom size rooms there for expansion. And then kind of towards the middle right, the ECDC classrooms. The 4 from the gym area could easily fit into that portion of the building. So when you think about it, there's a fair amount of expansion, but if you just right size fix the gym and play lab, you end up with, I would say, probably 4,000 to 5,000 square feet of expansion into the space. So it's a plan. It hasn't been fleshed out in great detail, but at least it gives you an idea or an indication as to what could happen in that building, as far as the amount of space that could be.
This is where I would wonder if we do hold on to the exploratory conversation of embedding integrated pre-K in our pre-K 5 4 buildings and build out an early childhood hub with Head Start, STEAM, ECDC, and town programming. I still remain concerned how we're splitting Head Start and doing all those logistical things across our schools.
So the integrated pre-K would move into the elementary.
Right, that's right. What I'm saying is, I think I still dream of having this preschool Stowe. And we are already dabbling with integrated preschool in our K-5 building. So I think it makes sense to maybe continue our specialized service students being in their home K-5 schools, but still having a Stowe.
Yeah.
Without integrated programming.
Okay. Yeah, and that's, I think, where we're headed with, that was on the chart for the specialized ed discussion. Yep. So that's Stowe. Oops. That we don't need to go over. That was one that we got discarded and I forgot to hide, so. Eli Whitney. Again, the conversation we had relative to adaptive reuse for Eagle, that's just the existing site plan. This is an overlay, and this is new, I think, to people around the table here is if Eagle goes into that building, what it could look like. Well, there's an enlarged floor plan, but we wanted to show the relationship of what could happen on the site too, because we talked a little bit about secure areas. And then here's the current use plan. So that's the current use plan for Eli Whitney. This is just to remind everybody what Eagle has today as far as the footprint, just so you can get a sense. 12,000 square feet more or less. And then this is the proposed plan for should this option be explored. Again, it's an idea at this point.
Did you indicate wing, like the top wing would be?
Yeah, I think there's more, you had more detail to what you had envisioned for separation.
So the way that it works now with a grouping of 4 classrooms, especially at the secondary level, it works well because they rotate. So there's 4 teachers, they each do a core academic class and they rotate. So the way this is set up is 3 groups of 4 classrooms. Our need right now is far more significantly at the secondary level. So we were thinking the back 2 sets of 4 would be secondary and the front would be younger. And then it gives some separation also. Yours is way prettier than mine was. Mine was all white out and white out.
So that shows kind of some of the concepts, whether it's in this building or another building. I think you get the idea of the strategies behind
This building's a tough building. It's not like we can add on or anything, because right now the parking, the bus route, everything is terrible. It's just a tough building. I think this is a great idea, moving it from where we initially had interest to here to.
Will this meet our future special ed needs? I think of I loved how you talked to the other site plans, like this buildable future planning for if we need.
Right.
I think that we need to do some, as a district, investment in just better early intervention, so we don't have as many high special ed concerns, but I think the reality is we have a high need. And the opportunity, I know the district has talked about like wanting to be this like regional hub. We can't be a regional hub if we're just building space for ourselves. So my just wonder is like, does this match what we're projecting as need? And are we missing an opportunity to get additional reimbursement and funds as creating like a regional specialized program? Especially if the timeline seems like Eagle is one of the last, sorry, Eagle, but just timeline seems like you're last on the list-ish.
Again, don't think of it that way. When we go to the grant, we're doing it.
Right, for referendum, but like the project last on the list, timeline project-wise. Do we really want to build for 10 years out differently?
So from a planning perspective, this kind of quadruples more or less the current space. So from a future possibility perspective, I think it gives you a lot of flexibility. From our perspective, operationally, I don't know if you want to speak to it, but.
I mean, I think no matter what, if you gave me a building this size tomorrow, I have to staff it before I can bring the kids in. So, I mean, no matter what we do, whenever a building this size is ready, it will take time to get staffed. And so the students will come in as the staff come in, basically. Do I think that a building this size could fill rather quickly when staffed appropriately? Yeah, for sure. But I think a building this size, I mean, this is 3 times what we have now. So you're looking at 90 to 100-ish kids. That's a lot of students of this profile in one building.
One thing too, you gotta, even though our wish list is to build for 10 years future, the state won't allow us. The state will allow us, thank you. The state will reimburse and allow us to build what is our enrollment. We can't build for extra 10 classrooms and the state's gonna say, well, then that's 100% on your dime. So now we're looking at more towards the taxpayer. So we can fudge it a little bit, 10, 15, 20%, but we can't, much as we all would love to go for 10 years, that's not realistic.
My other wonder, just thinking out loud, and this I think is more of a district, again, conversation, is programming. So when we're looking at building our specialized programs in our pre-K 5, I know you've done some interviews and we've looked at existing programs, but this is a chance to be innovative with our special ed programming design and continuum, and maybe we adapt some programming embedded in pre-K schools differently than what we have, or grown from what we have. Because I know there's growing capacity everywhere in every program. And so that's the other kind of discussion, is thinking about how do we embed specialized programming space in our pre-K 5s intentionally.
My question too is, if we're only looking at our current enrollment, but we're looking to possibly bring students back into district, are we allowed to use those students as enrollment possibilities?
I was gonna say, I mean, you can factor in, and obviously Julie would have better numbers, but we do still have to outplace some students. We would not be able to always bring back every single student. But we could factor in some of that information, I think, as well.
That's the goal.
Right, as well as obviously the regionalization. Again, we get emails constantly and we have to turn them down.
Yep. Yeah, in the legislation, it specifically states, the goal is to bring the out of placement, out of district students back. So that, and again, just I'll repeat it. It's a strategy. You know, it could change from building to building if there's so desire, and as we move through the community conversations. But I think what's important here is I think we have some pretty good strategies to apply to whatever we kind of learn through the future conversations. So that's kind of where we are with the options. If there's more feedback or, you know, a general, feeling of kind of where we want to head, or if we missed anything that you want us to look at.
Can I just ask a clarifying question for those who probably already know, and I'm sorry that I don't know this answer. Are all of our schools existing magic carpet destinations?
I don't think so.
I don't think all of them are. I can check around.
Then I would say, and so Magic Carpet is our community, like,
They can redo that.
affordable, yeah, and I would just say that I think
Yeah,
that's a really
they can
important
redo
thing.
that. We're not doing anything towards that. They can redo that.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking that I think that's for community access to these sites. I think that's just something to,
Again, that's something the community can alter once we have the sites. So that's nothing we need to worry about.
Okay.
So what we're trying to achieve tonight is, we're trying to get ready for the 22nd. Is this the direction? Again, we're not saying on the 22nd, this is what we're doing, like it or not, this is what we're doing. It's still open, but this is kind of the direction based on all the work that has been done to date. All the feedback, all the meetings, everything John Daigle met with. This is a collective of where we're going. We're close, we're 60, 75% there, but we're not gonna say to the public, this is what we're doing. We're just letting them know. Some of them don't even know this freaking thing's happening. You know, I put something on Facebook and they're like, what is this? And I was like, oh, gee, here we go. Come to meeting.
I guess,
Just let me do, so that's what this is where we're at tonight. So now, unless there's some major changes that y'all want to do from the 3 school to 4 school, is everybody okay to allow them to continue? So now the next thing we're going to be focusing on is community engagement. So in order to do that, we gotta say, you guys good to go? Unless there's something, and again, this, even what they submitted tonight, or presented tonight, not sketched in stone. We're trying to make sure we can use each site, period. You know, we initially we were talking about building a new school, doing this, doing that. Everything was on the table. So now we're kind of honing it in. So the footprint's not going to be the same. The program that you see is not going to be exactly the same. All we're saying is that we can do what's required program and footprint-wide in the sites. And as far as the scheduling of building, being able to build a building on site, then knock down is amazing. I mean, that's a godsend right there. You know, if we had to build a swing space, and we're still looking, we're not done, we're still looking at swing space. We're in the hall, Carroll Hall and John Santinella, and we're all looking into using CREC. We're trying to see if we can get the first or second floor on CREC if need be, because they only had like 56 kids in that entire building. If that, I mean, I did 32 at one point.
On Route 5?
I don't think so. I think that enrollment, Randy, is over 500 students.
Last time I had 56.
Crack on Route 5 has 500 students. They have 125 per grade level.
In the one on Route 5?
Yes.
About 4 months ago, I was told.
They redesigned their whole program. It's not, you
Renamed
know, they renamed it, and that building is packed.
Their enrollment's about 512. They have approximately 125 per grade level.
Okay, well, that's not the information I got 4 months ago.
No,
This
true,
school
honest.
year.
I'll second that.
Okay, well, one less thing we gotta look into then.
right? Take that off your list.
They might have thought you were asking about a different building, but that building.
No, I didn't realize that. Again, when I went to the state, I don't know, they weren't aware or whatever, this is a local.
No, that building is.
So basically, what I'm looking for out of everybody is to give them the okay to let's move ahead. And again, this is not set in stone. We just gotta know what direction to go in. And once we do that,
C1 is what
then
we're
we can
looking at.
start talking about community engagement, which we're gonna be doing this evening. So, yes, Tina?
I think it's great. I think that a lot of the collaborative work that you've done with central office is really, really important. Because there's been a lot of talk about repurposing the annex, but don't talk about including like the wrestling room and thinking about Buzz and all those additional programs. So I think you've done a lot of collaborative work with central office, and I appreciate that. And I'm leaning more towards one plan, but I like them both. I could live with them both. So thank you for all your hard work.
So I just want to be clear, I need clarity. So C1 is the option that we're looking at 4 schools on existing school sites,
Every site reutilized.
every site reutilized.
Correct.
I love that. I think that's probably a best case scenario to sell to the community. I think when we're looking at what do we do on the 22nd, personally, I think we demonstrate the really thoughtful process that we did here. I think that demonstrates that we are carefully considering taxpayer dollars and space and options and size. I think we let them kind of maybe know where we're at-ish. Because I will say, I'm going to continue to come to the table to see how we can maximize that Stowe project that's at the end of the timeline. And maybe redesign what those pre-K 5s look like a little-ish. But I think that the concept and the models make sense. I appreciate you facilitating us through this really challenging, big concept. There's a lot on the table. I think it's important that taxpayers see this thought process, that like.
So we're gonna go through the community engagement now, but I just wanted to make sure everybody's okay that there's, nothing, that we're not going on the wrong road. Part of the engagement, they're gonna dissect it from day one. We're gonna talk about the potential projects that are in town, the housing projects coming up, the town, we're enrollment right now. This is enrollment, which is prudential, protection, all these options that we were involved in, it's all gonna be part of that. So if everybody's okay to say, we did this, let's move on now to how to start educating the public, if everybody's okay with that. Yes, sir.
I think that collectively as a group, I think what was presented here is what we should be going with. You can present both of the scenarios that you presented to us. I myself, I like the C1 model, cost effective for the taxpayer. And I'd like to see that be presented.
All right, so we're okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
We're moving forward. This is great.
Now, you guys saw the number when the completion of this construction will be, so you're gonna be sticking around, a lot of you. for
2032.
I'm not going. Unless I sell my property.
There we go. All right, sir, I'll hear it.
Okay, so just circling back on a few things, and I promise we'll be brief here. The boards are delivered, the handouts are printed, they're at buildings that we visited, so hopefully everybody's seeing those out, and I know Randy, you posted, so, and I think John, you received all
We
those.
received the idea books, so we'll have those out at the community conversation. And then we're trying to pick up appropriate activities to get the kids to start thinking about projects. So once it's out public, we'll have the idea books available at parent and family events. And then at appropriate times have students, provide input towards the
Our high
project.
schoolers gonna dress up our schools, man. They can do that.
Is there something that we can share, like on Facebook, about the specific October 22nd meeting? Like maybe, I know we have some PDFs that are like very involved, like maybe something like, hey, come out to this, like very easy to read,
Sure.
But I took my Facebook, I did, if anybody wants to copy it or whatever, is the pamphlet that
Yeah, there was just a lot of like words on it, so I
I'll make
just
one up.
figured to like have people say, okay, let's come to this. They can ask, come to this, we'll answer your questions that you're gonna have, like,
One thing I'm gonna request, if you put anything on Facebook, do not get into a dialogue. Tell them this is for informational purpose only, and come to a meeting. Don't ask, don't answer, don't.
comments.
Zero comments, please, because we're not gonna get into, well, she said this, he said this, and now you're wrong, and so.
Informational only. There's an
Informational
info
purpose
session.
only.
right, it's
Residents
basically
please be
just like,
involved.
hey, come to this session. If people
Absolutely.
start asking questions, like, you just do not engage. Try not to engage with those.
I saw
Do
in
not,
Antonio's
try
email,
not, do
are you
not.
guys gonna make a flyer for consistency, so we're all sharing something the same?
Flyers up on the district webpage, so the community.
So, but like I said, like again, that's like a lot of information for, they're gonna have questions on that information. I think that we should
Which is
have
good.
something very easy, just to invite that. Does that make sense? I don't know if that
I thought all the information makes questions, so then come to the meeting.
Right, I'm gonna make somebody who's not.
We can definitely make a simplified 8.5 by 11 flyer specific to that event and a social media post.
Yeah.
That's like just a little Instagram square, so
Right.
it's all the same brand. And you can just run it through, yeah. No problem. Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it,
Yes,
no
ma'am.
worries. No
For
problem.
the community conversation on the 22nd, it says existing conditions. So are we gonna like put up pictures of what some of those existing conditions are? Because you have to see it to believe it.
Yeah,
Yep, so.
so go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So what's on the screen is kind of basic agenda of how we try to format these. We try to keep our information, the presentation to like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, just because I think we're gonna lose people's interest. So it'll be a lot of information to share, but our hope is to talk about the process, talk about the conditions, talk about the why, why this group is doing this work, and then what the possibilities could be, and then that's it, open it up for dialogue and discussion. Any questions?
Yeah, I think what Tina said was a good selling point, when we were doing each of the schools, show the existing conditions.
We will, yeah.
A lot of people that don't have kids in school don't go to these things and don't go to the schools, but, I mean, if you show them and say, we can't even open a window without pushing the entire panel out, the air is coming through the bottom, I mean, they don't know about this stuff. They're like, well, why don't you just renovate this one? You can't, the structure is integrity, they don't know this stuff, so I think that's a great 100% selling point.
And talking about like how you can't, in these school buildings, just replace a door jamb. Because it opens up that process of you have to, the whole thing, it's just opening up a literal can of worms. So I think people need to know that's why you can't just replace windows or replace a door jamb or do these little patchworky replacements that cause you to remove structure or. Because that's what they're gonna say. Like,
Yep,
we'll just
understood.
replace it, like Randy said.
I'm all about making sure we get like genuine community engagement, and it's hard getting folks to show up at things. So I think all of us promoting it, but my wonder too is thinking about our partnership and role here at the table. How we are, I know we've been putting it on the school side for Parent Square. It's up at our school site. So if you go to parent pickup, the like flyers are in the doors. My wonder is on the town side. How can we maybe do some work with our senior center, ACDC, youth services to also be pumping out messaging to get community involvement? I think we want people to know about this and be informed about it so they come out and vote for it.
So once we have a PAC, that is what they're gonna be doing. Once we have a direction of PAC, they're gonna be doing meetings at the senior center a couple of times. They're gonna be going to PTO meetings a couple of times. Some of them may stand out at Stop and Shop or Big Y, just as people come out, here's a pamphlet. No discussion, here's a pamphlet. Those are the things that the PAC, and this is why the PAC is so important to educate the public, because we're getting 1% coming to these public things. And people that vote no before they vote yes.
Yep.
So the PAC is so crucial, and it totally swayed JFK. It failed, and then we did it again, but the PAC educated them.
I was
We
just
showed
watching
them that there was a
Weathersfield
mechanical-
finally just passed.
Yeah, we
What
showed
did
them that
they
the
do?
mechanical system was on a tractor trailer being pumped in the window. People didn't know that because they don't have kids going to school. People don't know the conditions here, so that is why the PAC is so important. Once we get a defined direction.
Okay, so we will tune up our slide deck for that community conversation and distribute it. We'd like to probably get that out next week at some point, so we'll send it through you, Randy, and if there's comments, if we're missing something, again, it's gonna be a balance between high level and trying to hit all the points, so, but also keeping it, to that 20-25 minute range. So our goal is to have it last overall an hour. We can stay as long as people want and have questions, but we've definitely seen a reduction in attendance ever since kind of COVID. People will listen, they'll listen to the videos at their own leisure and catch up. A lot of people don't do these town halls, but every community is different, but we'll be prepared either way, and then make sure that we have material to push out for those individuals that are just, more inclined to do it on their phone and listen. We've prepped a survey that will also distribute, and we thought that Mentimeter that we did here with this group,
Yeah, that
some
was really
format of that would really, I think, helps for the people that are in attendance in the room. It kind of loosens people up and it starts a dialogue. So we'll have those prepared as well.
That's what I was going to ask, is the interactive discussion using kind of those Mentimeter questions. I think that's a great way to get the audience feeling like they have voice in the process. My other wonder, because I think you're exactly right, people don't show up to these things. But I also think about, and this is us as a committee thinking, how do we maximize where people are? And like the Mentimeter questions, that could be a good thing that like parent-teacher conferences are coming up. Do we put the QR code at sign-up sheets and parents take that and feel interactive? So I think there's ways that we can maximize engagement even if folks don't physically show up.
And like when do we want to go back to council and present to them something, or like a mini version of this kind of thing? So it's on people's radar even more.
I think, I was gonna say too, like, one of the hooks with the high school is like, people knew we were closing one high school and merging.
Sure.
And that was a very emotional argument. Like, I don't think people really understand that we're going back to a K-5 model and we're merging two schools again. And I think that's a hook that will make people start paying attention. Because they're just,
Because then the
Because they're
redistricting
just
word,
thinking
the
of it.
redistricting word will also get people.
to start paying attention.
And I think too, what people will need to understand, and I think we were talking about this the other night, is that this is 10 years or 8 years. So we're not talking about your children particularly right now, because the people that they are thinking that it's gonna affect are gonna be in high school. It's kids that might not even be born yet, that this is gonna impact,
This
right?
won't open until
this-
kids are,
this-
like,
the
these kids
magnitude- this
now are
is-
gonna be 5,
Right.
like, that's.
This is one of the biggest magnitude projects this town's ever done. This is totally gonna revamp residents, the cost of residents, the enrollment of people moving in and out of this town, businesses coming in. I mean, we've been talking, the senators and stuff in legislation, they've been so behind us that we're getting questions from other communities, like, oh my God, you guys are doing this right, man. This could be a role model for other towns and other parts of the state, because this affects everybody, and that's something where we have to, and I will never use the word sell. This is where we have to educate people. Even if you don't have any children, even if you have grandkids, just like you said, this is the future. This is not today. These buildings are falling apart today. There is no second chance. If this does not pass, we are in a world of shit, because these buildings are that bad. I mean, there is no fixing these things.
And
Yeah.
universal pre-K, like we're.
Right. So we just gotta educate them and show that this is the best thing for this town of Enfield.
I don't know if this is a question for you, Randy. So back to the community conversation on October 22nd. Is that going to be airing live for everyone to see, or is that going to be taped, or is?
Well, we're gonna talk to see if the town, because it's at JFK, so we're gonna see if we can get it. I don't know if it's remote, if ETV has their cameras or something, so I'll talk to council and Board of Ed and IT.
I'd be in favor of airing it live if we can,
I think it'd be great.
and taping it.
100%, if we can,
Put it on
absolutely.
YouTube and.
Right.
I don't know that it'll be live, but we can easily record it to play over and over again. I don't know that it'll be live.
Either way, I think that's going to help the sell.
100%.
And people that can't be there that night, I mean, we could probably reach an audience 4 or 5 times that if we record it.
Just what you say, it's funny, I talked to people and they said, did you watch Wetlands last night? I'm like, what? You watched Wetlands? People do that? They got comments, but now they're gonna be informed.
I saw you.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, I think that's what they did. All right, sorry.
No,
You done?
so next steps, So we'll work on finalizing the community conversation deck based on some of the comments we heard and our experience. We'll do we're gonna start if you do have, if you are receiving questions, we should probably collect those.
Right.
Because I think a FAQ sheet on a website makes a lot of sense, just to dispel, if there's concerns or rumors or, so we've often just had that as we just keep on adding to the questions if they're common questions. We have the survey, so we'll get the slide deck out, the survey, which will be the Mentimeter. We have some follow-up meetings still we mentioned town manager finance. I put some of the other categories, with Park and Rec, DPW, those kinds of things. But
I actually have to read.
so those meetings are, I think, important that we'll have, and then we're just going to continue to refine the options based on some of the comments we received tonight, but also whatever comes out of the community conversation. So I think that's pretty much it for us. So this was very helpful for the feedback tonight. I appreciate everybody's input.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, we totally appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
All right, anybody have any additional comments or questions for them? All right. So our next meeting is scheduled for 3 weeks, but we're gonna have to meet the community one prior to that, so.
Sorry, I should have put next meeting.
11/19.
So one of the things I was thinking is, as far as, I'd like to have you guys all on the stage if possible, if you want to line up chairs and we do introductions and then, yeah, you can see your face and so then, you know, you get bumped into the supermarket, they know who to ask questions to.
Or not.
Next meeting I have is 10/29. And then just as a reminder, the 11/19, for those looking a little later, the 11/19 will have the demographer enrollment projections, MP planning. So next meeting is 10/29, which I think we'll just focus on whatever we learned at the community conversation, and whatever we need to adjust in our thought process. And then the following meeting will be the enrollment, which that'll help us kind of fine tune some of the sizes and numbers too.
So one of the questions I have is when we do this community thing, if people have questions, where should they be sending them to?
So do we have an email set up yet?
I don't believe that we have an email.
Because people are gonna start having questions. So is there one area, essential area?
We should have,
We have like
contact
an
email set up.
Or like a, would it be like an enfieldschools.org email?
Yes, yeah, it should be an Enfield schools
I know, poor
email.
Leslie.
So we'll,
John, is there something, do we have something like that we can?
Typing a note now.
Thank you, John.
so we do that.
He knew the assignment.
And then we also typically have, so for those that don't want to ask questions in a public forum, we have note cards and a
The suggestion box.
suggestion box.
Yeah, I'm just saying, but
Some
again,
people
like,
are
people
nice.
are home watching it, now they have a question, where can they ask
Yep,
questions
yeah.
to? People, like you said, may be there, but they're not gonna stand up and do anything. But we want them to feel that this is a community decision here. This isn't affecting anybody, like we said, which we all know. Okay, if we can do something like that, then we can advertise it there. Anything else? All right, any committee member or liaison has any comments or questions? Anybody have any good to the order they want to share? before we leave?
Congratulations to Randy
Yeah.
Daigle.
Retirement and an award.
Yeah, I was not expecting the award by no means. But thank you guys
Well
very
deserved.
much.
I mean, they should have waited till the school referendum passed, maybe. Love you, Randy.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody care to make a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn. Second.
All right, any comments? Show of hands, all in favor, anything against, and we abstain. Thank you all so much for coming.
One, nothing.